Now we're going to set up our dog, but before we do, I noticed that I have a commit down here in plastic showing my art packs folder, and that's because I accidentally put it in one folder too low or one folder too deep. So I'm going to hit open in Explorer, pop open the window here, this art packs folder. I didn't want it to be in my alien blasters folder. I want it to be one folder up in my project. So I'm going to paste it up there so that it's not actually in my project. It's not something I want to be part of the project. It's already included in there when I've imported it in. So now I should be able to go back in and see my pending change gone. All right, now that I've done that, let's go modify our dog. The first thing I want to do is shrink this dog down a little bit, but I don't want to do that on this root dog right here. Instead, I want to go down to the base object that has the animator, and I'm going to set the scale here to about 0.5 on the X and a 0.5 on the Y. Now, if I go change the pixels per unit, that will shrink everything down on this setup of textures, but because of the way that the character is set up, with all of these different body parts, if I do that, the animations are all going to instantly break. Let's go take a look at that real quick. I'll show you what that looks like so that you can see, and then we'll go through the scaling. So if I went to the dog and I changed all of these pixels per unit to maybe be 200 so that it shrunk down, and see how I get small sprites, but everything's separated and far apart. And if I press play, actually I don't think there's an animator on here, so probably nothing will happen at all. But if I did press play, all the parts will animate, but they're just going to be offset in the wrong spot. So we're going to undo that change. Hit apply, set them all back to 1 or 100, and then we'll change the scale here of the child object instead. And then we're going to flip this around as well by changing the rotation to 180. I want all my enemies to face the left by default, at least most of them. This one definitely. And I want to have that, I just kind of want that to be the default direction. So that way I'm running to the right and the enemies are to the left. I could, of course, have dogs that are flipped around, but I'll do that by flipping the base parent object instead of this child one. So now I've got my dog there and I want to make him animate. I don't have an animator controller because we deleted out that override one and the character one that was there to kind of show off what it could do, but didn't make sense for what our character was actually going to do. So I'm going to go into the dog folder, right click, choose create, and we'll create an animator controller. Here I'll name it dog, and we'll assign it to our dog. So select the dog, and got to select the base object though, the one that has the animator, and drag it on. Then I'll double click, and that'll open up my animator window. If yours is docked up here, or over here, or somewhere else, just dock it down below so that you can see it. Actually, you know what? Dock it up here instead. I lied. Dock it up at the top so that you can see the animations instead. Now, with the animator window open, let's take the dog idle or idle dog and drop it right into the blank canvas. That should be our default animation. And I don't want this dog to walk forward right now. I just want it to go up and down and shoot lasers. That's my thought. I don't want him to be moving. I want him to be a kind of a standing still, but up and down blasting target that's kind of a problem like that and acts differently than some of the other enemies. So I've got this idle dog animation. And the animation I want to go into is the rising dog animation. So I'm going to take the rising dog animation and drag it out as well. Next, I'll create a transition by right-clicking on idle dog, hitting make transition, and then choosing rising dog as the target. So it'll transition between idle and rising, and then I'll make a transition back from rising to idle. Now, if I go into my scene view or into my game view and press play, I should expect to see my dog just going up and down, back and forth between those two animations. Let's see. There he goes. He's up and he's down. If I take my animation window and just drag it down, you can actually see it kind of happening as he goes through the idle, up and down, and he's just playing his animation, just like I expect him to do. Now, I also want him to play his laser blast animation. I want him to play that constantly as well. So what we're going to do is add a new layer. We'll go to the layers section. We have this base layer, which is dealing with our going up and down. Let's hit the plus button and add a new layer and call this attack layer. In our attack layer, we're going to add in 2 more animations. So I'm going to take my animator and I'm going to drag it up. I think I'll dock it up here so I can see all of these windows at the same time. I got the base layer that has that movement on it, or the idle and the rising up and down. Use the middle mouse to pan around, by the way. I go back to the attack layer and I'm going to add first a blank state. So we'll right click and choose create state and choose empty. This is going to be a default state that does absolutely nothing. And then we'll add a shoot dog state, or a shoot dog animation right below it. Drop that in, and then we'll add a transition. Let's zoom in a little bit. Right click, make transition, and drag that down to shoot dog. I'll right click and make a transition back up to that blank state from shoot dog. And then we're going to go on to the transition for shooting. And I don't want this to necessarily shoot constantly, but I'm going to start it off shooting constantly and then add a condition. So before we add in our condition here, let's go to the layer, hit the little gear, and drag this weight all the way to the right. I'm going to save, make sure that I've saved my project as well. Press play, and I want to watch my dog and make sure that he's animating, going up and down, and shooting at the same time. I think it looks like he's doing it. Let's make this thing nice and big. I'm going to stop playing, and let's right click and hit maximize. There we go. And play. And I can see my dog is going up and down, doing what he's supposed to do. Now, there is an error here saying base animation event has no function name specified. So there's an error that we need to address, and I want to start adding some control over this so that maybe we can control when our dog goes up and down. But first, let's take a look at what that error is. Now, if I stop playing and I unmaximize my game window and I go down to the console window, you can see that it says base animation event has no function name. And it's saying base because that's the name of this object. And it's saying that there's an animation event that's playing that has no function name specified. So one of these animations has an animation event on it where it's trying to call into code, but it doesn't know what code to call into. And the animation that's doing that is the shoot dog one. We can take a look at the shoot dog animation by double clicking on the motion here. And we'll get the animation window, but I need to go click on the base character to actually see it. So if you don't click on that, you're not going to get it to show up. And now once you have this animation window showing up, if you don't have the correct animation showing, you can just hit the drop down and find shoot dog. Here I can scroll through and actually see the animation playing on my little dog there. You can see it lighting up on him. But I can also get to this point right here where this little bar is, and that bar is indicating the animation event. So right at this point of the animation is when it's supposed to do something, which is probably the time when it's supposed to be spawning that laser so that it visually matches. And if I look at the function, you see it says no function selected. So I need to add a function here that we can call into from our animation event, because I want it to tie in exactly with what the animator and the artist had set up so that it looks right and feels correct. And to do that, I'm going to go to my dog, the base component here, and we're going to add a new script. So let's take this animation window, dock it down below, go to the project window, and go to our scripts folder. We'll create a new dog script, name a new C# script named dog, and we're going to at first attach it to this base object, not to the dog, because that won't get the animation event callback, but instead to the base object. And we'll talk about how we can adjust that in just a moment. First, though, we're going to drag the dog onto here. And now if we go back into the dog, or not back into, but first into the dog script, we can add a public method that we can now call from our animation event. So say public void shoot. And it doesn't have to do anything. We can just, let's write a log, debug.log shooting, and add a semicolon. Now if we go back into our animation event in the animation window, so I'll go find my animation window and make sure that I've got my base character selected. It's my animation window with that base character selected. Go find shoot, and we'll go find that animation event and hit the function drop down, and now shoot is an option because shoot is at the same level on this same object. Now let's press play. We should no longer have that error, and every time he shoots, we should see a little log down in the console. I'm going to drag the animator window down here, take the console window here, hit clear, and watch, and every time he goes up and blasts, we should expect to see some sort of a log. Oh, there it is. Shooting. The editor just hadn't updated my log entries. There we go. It's adding one entry each time he goes up and shoots. So now it's working, and I'm ready to tie in the actual shooting part. But I want to stop playing and go commit my changes because I've just added quite a bit to my animator. These changes for our files here, these meta changes, are actually not changes. What happened was we modified them and then changed them right back, or at least I did. So I'm going to go select them all, right click. Well, first let's just go double check that I haven't selected anything that's not an image here. Okay, yep, I'm going to go select all of them except for that sandbox file. I don't want to select that. The ones that are not new, the ones that I've changed that were just the sprites. Right click and just hit undo because there was no actual difference there. And then I'll commit my changes. We've added the dog animator controller. And check it in.